My best friend faked her death, abandoned her 3-year-old with me, and reappeared 18 years later, demanding her share of the insurance money. When I begged her to leave us alone, she laughed and said, "You were always just the babysitter. I'm the mother." I just stared at her. That was 6 months ago. Last week, she was sentenced to federal prison in an orange jumpsuit that matched her fake tan. When my best friend Izzy showed up at my apartment with a 3-year-old and medical papers, I knew my life was about to change. She had always been the dramatic type, the kind who turned a paper cut into a medical emergency. But this time her voice cracked when she spoke. "It's cancer. Aggressive. The doctors say 6 months at most." I stared at the papers showing test results I couldn't understand. Her daughter Ginnery sat on my couch eating goldfish crackers and watching cartoons. "I need you to adopt her," Izzy said. It wasn't a question. Her dad's gone and my parents are dead. You're all she has. I wanted to say no. I was 28 and single with a demanding job at a marketing firm. But Izzy had been my college roommate and the closest thing I had to a sister. So I said yes. The adoption happened fast. Izzy's health deteriorated quicker than expected. She made me promise to never tell Ginnery the truth about how sick she was. "Let her think I loved her enough to make sure she'd be okay," she said from her hospice bed. She'd already set up a $2 million life insurance policy with Ginnery as the beneficiary, to be held in trust until she turned 21. "For her future," Izzy whispered. 3 weeks later, she was gone. Closed casket. The cancer had ravaged her body too much for viewing. Raising Ginnery was harder than I imagined. She had nightmares constantly. She'd wake up screaming for her mommy, and I'd hold her until she fell back asleep. I gave up promotions to be home for school pickups. I stopped dating because Ginnery needed stability. When she was 11, she asked why her real mom left her. I told her Izzy loved her so much she made sure she'd always be taken care of. Ginnery didn't buy it. "If she loved me, she would have stayed," she said. The teenage years were brutal. Ginnery attempted sewer slide when she was 15 after a particularly bad identity crisis. I spent my entire savings on therapy and treatment. I sold my car to pay for a specialized program. My boss threatened to fire me for missing so much work, but I didn't care. Ginnery needed me. Slowly, painfully, we worked through her trauma together. When she was 17, she called me mom for the first time. Not by accident. On purpose. "Thanks, Mom," she said after I picked her up from school. I cried the whole drive home. By the time Ginnery turned 20, we'd built a real life together. She was pre-med at Columbia with a full scholarship. She'd been secretly saving money from her part-time job to buy me a car since she knew I'd sold mine for her treatment. "You gave up everything for me," she said. "I want to give something back." She had plans for the insurance money too. She wanted to start a foundation for kids who lost parents to cancer. "Maybe something good can come from the bad," she said. That's when weird things started happening. Fresh flowers appeared on Izzy's grave that I didn't leave. Ginnery got an anonymous birthday card that said, "Almost time, sweetheart." I saw a woman at Ginnery's graduation who looked exactly like Izzy, but she disappeared before I could get close. A private investigator started calling, asking about Izzy's death and the insurance policy. He said he was hired to locate beneficiaries. My gut told me something was wrong. The week before Ginnery's 21st birthday, I was making her favorite lasagna when the doorbell rang. I opened it and nearly fainted. Izzy stood there, very much alive, with a man in an expensive suit. "Hi, bestie," she said with that same dramatic flair. "I'm here for what's mine." My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Izzy explained it all like she was telling me about her day. She'd paid off a hospice worker to fake the death certificate. She'd been living in Costa Rica under a fake name. She'd been watching us through Ginnery's Instagram for years, waiting for this moment. The man was her lawyer. He handed me papers claiming the adoption was done under false pretenses. "You can't do this," I said. My hands shook. Ginnery walked into the room and froze. She looked at Izzy like she was looking at a stranger. "Who's this?" she asked me. Izzy's face fell. "I'm your mother, sweetheart. I gave birth to you." Ginnery shook her head. "No, she's my mother." She pointed at me. "She's the one who stayed." Izzy lost it then. She screamed about sacrifices and how she needed the money because her rich husband had died leaving massive debts. She threatened to have me arrested for insurance fraud if I didn't cooperate. Ginnery stayed calm, too calm. She walked to her room and came back with a manila folder. "Actually," Ginnery said, "there's something interesting about biological parents who abandon their children and commit fraud." Izzy's face went white. Ginnery smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I've known you were alive for 3 years, and I've been preparing." She pulled out documents, photographs, and bank statements. "I hired my own investigator when I turned 18. Found out about your fake death, your debts, and your new identity in Costa Rica." She spread the papers on the coffee table. "I also found out about the insurance fraud charges pending against Maria Gonzalez." "That's you, right?" Izzy lunged for the papers, but Ginnery was faster. She stepped back, holding the folder tight. The lawyer tried to intervene, but I blocked his path. My heart pounded, but I kept my stance firm. "You can't prove anything," Izzy hissed. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. "That money is mine. I paid the premiums." Ginnery pulled out her phone and played a recording. Izzy's voice filled the room, talking to someone about faking death certificates and bribing officials. The date stamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago. Izzy's face drained of color. "How did you?" Izzy started. "Your lawyer talks too loud at airport bars," Ginnery said. She turned to the lawyer. "By the way, the Florida Bar Association would love to hear about your involvement in insurance fraud." The lawyer grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. "I was never here," he muttered before disappearing down the hallway. Izzy's composure cracked. She started crying, but they weren't real tears. I'd seen her fake cry enough times in college to know the difference. "Ginnery, sweetheart, I'm your mother. I gave you life." "No," Ginnery said. Her voice stayed steady. "You gave birth to me. There's a difference." She gestured to me. "She gave me life. She gave up her career, her savings, her everything. You gave up nothing." I watched my daughter stand tall against the woman who'd abandoned her. Pride swelled in my chest. This wasn't the broken teenager who'd tried to end her life. This was a strong young woman who knew her worth. Izzy changed tactics. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "I have photos of you growing up. I watched every milestone through social media. Doesn't that count for something? You watched me struggle with abandonment issues through a screen while sipping cocktails on a beach." Ginnery shot back. "You watched her sell her car to pay for my therapy. You watched her miss promotions to be at my school events. You watched, but you never helped." The truth of Ginnery's words hit hard. All those years of struggle, and Izzy had been living it up in Costa Rica. My hands clenched into fists. Izzy's fake tears dried up. Her face hardened. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way. I'll contest the adoption. I'll prove it was done under false pretenses. I'll take you both to court." "With what money?" Ginnery asked. "According to my investigator, you're broke. Your husband's creditors are closing in. That's why you're here." Izzy's mouth opened and closed like a a fish. She hadn't expected Ginnery to know so much. Neither had I, honestly. My daughter had been planning this for years. The insurance company knows about the fraud, Ginnery continued. I sent them the evidence 3 months ago. They're investigating. That money you're counting on? It's frozen. Izzy stumbled backward. Her designer heels caught on the rug and she had to grab the wall for support. You little witch, she snarled. You ruined everything. No, I said, finding my voice. You ruined everything 18 years ago when you chose money over your daughter. Izzy turned on me. You always were jealous of me. In college, you wanted what I had. My looks, my boyfriends, my life. So you stole my daughter. I saved your daughter, I corrected. From a life of wondering why she wasn't enough for her own mother to stick around. Ginnery moved to stand beside me. She slipped her hand into mine and squeezed. We're done here, she said to Izzy. You need to leave. Izzy didn't move. This isn't over. I'll find a way to get that money. Actually, it is over, Ginnery said. She pulled out one more document. This is a restraining order. Come near us again and you'll be arrested. And just so you know, the Costa Rican authorities are very interested in Maria Gonzalez's real identity. Izzy's bravado finally crumbled. She looked between us, searching for any crack in our united front. Finding none, she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. She paused at the threshold. I loved you, Ginnery, she said quietly. In my own way. Your way wasn't enough, Ginnery replied. It never was. Izzy left without another word. We heard her heels clicking down the hallway, getting fainter until they disappeared entirely. Ginnery and I stood there in silence, still holding hands. Finally, Ginnery turned to me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I knew. I wanted to protect you from her as much as you protected me. I pulled her into a hug. How long have you really known? Since I was 17. I found some old papers in the attic and started digging. The more I found, the angrier I got. But then I realized something. She pulled back to look at me. I already had a real mother. I didn't need her. We sat on the couch, the same one where 3-year-old Ginnery had eaten goldfish crackers all those years ago. There's something about Ginnery's 3-year investigation that makes me wonder what else she knows that she's not saying yet. She told me about hiring the investigator with money from her job, about tracking Izzy's movements online, about preparing for this day. I knew she'd come back when the money was available, Ginnery said. People like her always do. I thought about all the sacrifices over the years, the promotions I'd passed up, the relationships I'd ended because they didn't understand my commitment to Ginnery, the savings I'd emptied. Looking at the strong, smart woman beside me, I knew I'd do it all again. What happens now? I asked. Now we live our lives, Ginnery said. The insurance money will stay frozen during the investigation, but I don't care. I never wanted it anyway. She smiled. I have everything I need. The next few days were tense. We kept expecting Izzy to show up again, but she didn't. Ginnery's investigator reported that she'd fled back to Costa Rica, probably to avoid the authorities. The insurance company thanked Ginnery for the information and assured her the fraud would be prosecuted. A week after Izzy's visit, we were having dinner when Ginnery brought out a wrapped box. Early birthday present, she said. Inside was a photo album. The first picture showed me holding 3-year-old Ginnery at the adoption ceremony. We looked terrified but determined. The album chronicled our journey. First days of school, science fair projects, therapy sessions, graduation. The last photo was from the previous week. Both of us in the kitchen making lasagna, laughing at something I couldn't remember. This is our story, Ginnery said. The real one, not the one she tried to write. I flipped through the pages again, seeing our life together laid out in photographs. The hard times were there too. Pictures from the hospital after Ginnery's sewer slide attempt. Both of us looking exhausted and scared. But even in those dark moments, we were together. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Ginnery countered, for choosing me when you didn't have to, for staying when it got hard, for being my mom when my biological mother couldn't be bothered. The birthday party planning became our new normal. I spent the next morning calling bakeries while Ginnery sorted through old photos for a memory board. We worked side by side in comfortable silence, both pretending the threat of Izzy had passed. But I noticed how Ginnery checked her phone constantly, how she glanced at the door whenever footsteps passed in the hallway. 3 days before her 21st birthday, Ginnery came home from class looking pale. She dropped her backpack and sank onto the couch. I abandoned the decorations I'd been hanging and sat beside her. She showed me her phone, multiple missed calls from unknown numbers, text messages from people claiming to be old friends of Izzy's. Each one mentioned the insurance money. Each one had a different story about why Izzy deserved it. The pressure campaign had begun. I took the phone and scrolled through the messages. Some played the sympathy card, talking about Izzy's struggles. Others were more aggressive, questioning my motives for adopting Ginnery. One particularly nasty message accused me of manipulating a grieving mother. Ginnery's hands trembled as she took the phone back. The strong young woman who'd faced down Izzy was cracking under the barrage. I recognized the signs from her teenage years, the way she pulled at her sleeves, how her breathing became shallow. We spent that evening changing her phone number and updating her social media privacy settings. I watched her delete message after message, each one chipping away at her confidence. By the time we finished, she looked exhausted. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen at 5 a.m., laptop open, surrounded by legal documents. She'd been researching fraud statutes and insurance law. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. When I suggested she skip classes, she shook her head firmly. She wouldn't let Izzy disrupt her life, but the disruptions continued. A process server showed up at my office with papers. Izzy was contesting the adoption through a lawyer in Florida. My boss pulled me aside after the scene in the lobby. He reminded me about the company's policy on personal drama affecting work. The warning was clear. That afternoon, Ginnery's academic advisor called. Someone had contacted the school claiming Ginnery had lied on her scholarship application about being an orphan. The advisor assured us the claim was baseless, but they had to investigate. The stress was affecting Ginnery's pre-med studies right before finals. I found myself checking locks obsessively. Every unexpected knock made my heart race. The security I'd built over 18 years felt fragile. One morning, I discovered someone had been through our mail. Nothing was missing, but everything was slightly out of place. Ginnery started sleeping poorly again. I heard her pacing at night, checking windows. The nightmares from her childhood returned. More than once, I found her curled up on the bathroom floor after a panic attack. The therapy techniques we'd learned years ago became daily necessities. My work suffered. I missed deadlines while dealing with lawyers. My supervisor called me in for another meeting. She laid out my recent performance issues. The sympathy in her eyes didn't soften the ultimatum. Improve immediately or face termination. 18 years of solid work history meant nothing against recent failures. The financial pressure mounted. Legal consultations drained my checking account. The lawyer I hired required a retainer I could barely afford. Credit cards I'd paid off years ago crept back toward their limits. I started started calculating which bills could wait. Jinnery noticed the strain. She offered to use her college savings, but I refused. She increased her work hours, coming home exhausted from double shifts. Her grades started slipping. The pre-med program she'd worked so hard to enter sent warning letters about her attendance. 2 weeks after Izzy's visit, we got word that she'd hired a new legal team. High-powered attorneys from Miami who specialized in adoption challenges. They filed motions in multiple jurisdictions. The simple restraining order wasn't enough to stop legal proceedings. My lawyer explained the situation grimly. Fighting this would take months, maybe years. The costs would be astronomical. Even if we won, the legal bills would destroy us. He suggested settling. Maybe Jinnery could share some of the insurance money if it ever became available. Jinnery refused. She spent hours building her case against Izzy. The investigator she'd hired sent more evidence. Photos of Izzy living lavishly in Costa Rica while we struggled. Bank records showing hidden accounts. Proof of other schemes she'd run over the years. But evidence didn't pay legal bills. The university called again. The investigation into Jinnery's scholarship had expanded. Someone provided them with documents suggesting I'd received payments for adopting Jinnery. Complete fabrications, but they had to investigate. Jinnery's scholarship hung in the balance during final exam season. I started getting calls at work. Hang-ups mostly, but enough to disrupt my concentration. My desk phone would ring constantly during important meetings. IT traced the calls to various burner phones. My boss's patience wore thinner with each interruption. Jinnery's investigator warned us that Izzy had connected with other people she'd scammed over the years. They were comparing notes, possibly planning something together. The investigator needed more money to keep tracking their communications, money we didn't have. One evening, I came home to find Jinnery surrounded by medical textbooks, crying. She'd failed an important exam. The professor offered a makeup, but the damage to her GPA was done. Her dreams of medical school were slipping away because of the chaos Izzy created. The apartment felt smaller every day. We bumped into each other constantly, both of us on edge. Small irritations became bigger fights. Jinnery snapped at me for hovering. I snapped back about her leaving dishes in the sink. The stress fractured our usually solid relationship. My car started having problems. The mechanic found sugar in the gas tank. Coincidence maybe, but the repair bill wasn't. I took the bus to work, adding hours to my commute. Showing up late to meetings gave my boss more ammunition. Jinnery's birthday approached with a sense of dread rather than celebration. We canceled the party plans. Neither of us felt like celebrating. The insurance company sent letters about the investigation, each one more ominous than the last. They mentioned potential criminal charges for anyone involved in fraud. 3 nights before her birthday, I woke to find Jinnery gone. Her bed was empty, her phone left behind. Panic consumed me. I searched the apartment, the building, the neighborhood. I found her on the roof, sitting dangerously close to the edge. She wasn't planning anything, she assured me. Just thinking, remembering, wondering if Izzy was right, if none of this would have happened if she'd never been born. I held her while she sobbed, feeling the weight of failing to protect her from this pain. The next day, I made a decision. I called in sick to work and drove to the bank. I had an old retirement account I'd been saving. Not much, but enough to make a difference. The penalty for early withdrawal was steep, but Jinnery's well-being mattered more than retirement dreams. While I was gone, Jinnery got a visit from someone claiming to be Izzy's friend from Costa Rica. The woman spun tales of Izzy's desperation, how she'd been living in poverty, how the wealthy husband's story was exaggerated. She begged Jinnery to consider her biological mother's situation. Jinnery recorded the entire conversation. The woman let slip details about Izzy's current location, her new schemes, her plans to return to the States under another identity. Information the authorities would find very interesting. I'm curious how a college student working part-time could afford ongoing surveillance that even tracks online movements and international activities. The timing of everything hitting at once feels orchestrated somehow, like someone's pulling strings beyond just Izzy. But pursuing it meant more legal involvement, more costs. My boss called while I was at the bank. Don't bother coming back, she said. The disruptions, the absences, the performance issues, it was too much. 18 years with the company ended with a phone call. The retirement withdrawal suddenly became more critical. I didn't tell Jinnery about losing my job, not yet. She had enough weight on her shoulders. Instead, I focused on her birthday preparations. I bought a small cake and her favorite takeout. We'd celebrate quietly, just the two of us, like we had so many times before. But the universe wasn't done with us. The morning of Jinnery's birthday, we woke to find an eviction notice on our door. The landlord had received complaints about the constant disruptions, process servers, investigators, strange visitors. It was too much for the other tenants. We had 30 days to leave. Jinnery stared at the notice, then at me. All the fight drained from her face. She looked like the broken 15-year-old I'd found after her sewer slide attempt. The strong young woman who'd stood up to Izzy was crumbling under the sustained assault. I made her favorite breakfast while she showered. She emerged looking older than her 21 years. We ate in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The birthday cake sat untouched on the counter. Neither of us had the energy for false celebration. That afternoon, Jinnery's investigator called with urgent news. Izzy was planning to return to the States under a new identity. She'd connected with a document forger in Miami. The plan was to establish a new life and pursue the insurance money from a different angle. Time was running out to stop her, but stopping her required resources we didn't have. The investigator needed payment to continue surveillance. The lawyer needed money to file new motions. The authorities needed more evidence to act. Everything required money we'd already spent protecting ourselves. Jinnery made a decision that broke my heart. She withdrew from the pre-med program. Temporary, she said, just until things settled. But we both knew the truth. Dreams deferred often became dreams denied. She took a full-time job at a medical clinic, filing papers instead of studying to become a doctor. I started job hunting immediately, but references were a problem. 18 years at one company meant limited contacts. My former boss, bound by company policy, could only confirm employment dates. The circumstances of my departure hung unspoken over every application. We developed a siege mentality. Every day brought new challenges, legal documents to review, bills to juggle, threats to counter. We moved through our routines like soldiers, constantly watching for the next attack. The easy laughter we'd shared for years became a distant memory. Jinnery's investigator sent one last report before we had to stop paying him. Izzy had successfully obtained new identity documents. She was Maria Santos now, a widow from Venezuela seeking asylum. The elaborate backstory included fake children, murdered by cartels. A sob story designed to gain sympathy and access. The insurance company's investigation dragged on. They froze not just the fraudulent policy, but began questioning the legitimacy of Jinnery's Ginnery's adoption. Every document we'd filed 18 years ago came under scrutiny. The life we'd built together was dissected by strangers looking for deception. My job search grew desperate. Entry-level positions rejected me as overqualified. Management positions wanted recent experience I couldn't provide. Savings dwindled. Credit cards maxed out. The retirement withdrawal disappeared into legal fees and living expenses. The financial security I'd spent 2 decades building evaporated in weeks. Ginnery worked double shifts at the clinic, coming home exhausted. She'd fall asleep over medical journals she studied in spare moments, clinging to dreams of returning to school. I'd cover her with a blanket and update the job application spreadsheet, both of us pretending tomorrow would be better. Then came the knock we'd been dreading. Not Izzy this time, but a federal investigator. The insurance fraud case had expanded. They needed to interview us about the adoption, the death certificate, our knowledge of Izzy's plans. We were witnesses now, possibly suspects if we couldn't prove our innocence. The interview lasted hours. They questioned every detail of that day 18 years ago. Why had I agreed so quickly to adopt? Had Izzy offered me money? Did I know about the insurance policy? The implications hung heavy, that I'd been part of the scheme from the beginning. Ginnery faced worse accusations. They suggested she'd known all along her mother was alive, that the confrontation was staged to establish innocence, that we'd been waiting together for the insurance payout. Her evidence against Izzy became evidence of our own involvement in their eyes. We hired a criminal defense attorney with money we didn't have. He reviewed our case and delivered harsh truth. Proving innocence was harder than proving guilt. The investigation could drag on for years. Even if cleared, the damage to our reputations would be permanent. The eviction deadline approached. Apartment hunting with no job and a pending federal investigation proved impossible. Landlords ran background checks and found the legal proceedings. Our applications were rejected repeatedly. The possibility of homelessness loomed closer each day. Ginnery's health suffered. The stress triggered migraines that left her incapacitated. She missed work, risking the job that kept us afloat. I watched her fade, becoming a shadow of the vibrant young woman she'd been. The guilt of failing to protect her consumed me. One morning, I found her packing her things. She'd made a decision without telling me. A cousin in Oregon had offered her a place to stay. She could transfer to a clinic there, start fresh where Izzy couldn't find her. The unspoken truth, she was leaving to protect me from further harm. I helped her pack, both of us crying. 18 years of building a life together, and Izzy had destroyed it in weeks. We sorted through photos, deciding what she'd take. The album she'd given me stayed with me. She said I needed the reminder of better times more than she did. The night before she left, we sat on the couch one last time. The same couch where 3-year-old Ginnery had eaten goldfish crackers, where teenage Ginnery had cried through identity crises, where adult Ginnery had stood strong against her biological mother. Now it would go to storage with everything else we couldn't afford to keep. She left on a rainy Tuesday morning. I drove her to the bus station in a borrowed car. We held each other on the platform, promises to stay in touch feeling hollow. She boarded the bus looking back once, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I watched until the bus disappeared, then sat in the car sobbing. The apartment felt empty without her. I packed our belongings slowly, each item a memory of better times. The eviction date arrived with nowhere to go. A friend from my old job offered her couch temporarily. I accepted gratefully, pride long since abandoned. The legal proceedings continued without resolution. Izzy, now Maria Santos, had disappeared again. The insurance company kept the money frozen indefinitely. The federal investigation expanded to include other policies, other potential frauds. We were small players in what became a larger case. I found work eventually. Part-time retail, a far cry from marketing management. It paid enough to contribute to my friend's rent and chip away at legal bills. I video called Ginnery when possible, watching her rebuild her life 3,000 miles away. She smiled more there, the distance from chaos helping her heal. But the damage was done. The family we'd built was scattered. The dreams we'd nurtured were abandoned. The security we'd created was shattered. All because one woman decided her needs mattered more than her daughter's life. Late at night, sleeping on my friend's couch, I thought about choices. The choice to take in a 3-year-old. The choice to fight through hard years. The choice to stand against Izzy. I'd make the same choices again, even knowing the cost. Because for 18 years, I'd had a daughter who chose me too. The investigation dragged on. Lawyers sent bills. Creditors called constantly. But somewhere in Oregon, Ginnery was working at a clinic, still dreaming of medical school. She sent pictures of her new life. Hiking trails, coffee shops, a small apartment she shared with roommates. Building again from nothing, but building nonetheless. I knew we'd survive this. Separately for now, but with the bond Izzy tried to break still holding. The woman who gave birth to Ginnery had destroyed so much, but she couldn't destroy the fundamental truth. I was Ginnery's mother in every way that mattered. That would never change, no matter how many identities Izzy created or how much chaos she caused. The story wasn't over. Investigations would conclude. Legal matters would resolve. Someday, somehow, we'd find our way back to stability. But the middle of our story, the part where we faced the storm together, had taught us both a hard truth. Sometimes love isn't enough to protect the people we care about from those who should have loved them first. The eviction deadline forced immediate decisions. I found a studio apartment in a rougher neighborhood, the only place that would accept someone with pending federal charges. The deposit wiped out my remaining savings. I moved our essentials while most belongings went to a storage unit I couldn't afford long term. My friend helped transport boxes in her pickup truck. We worked in exhausted silence, both understanding this was temporary survival, not living. The new apartment smelled like old cigarettes and had bars on the windows. I scrubbed it clean anyway, needing some sense of control. Why does the investigator just happen to have all these details about Izzy's new identity as Maria Santos with the fake murdered children? Ginnery called from Oregon that first night in the new place. She described her cousin's spare room, the clinic job that barely covered expenses, the community college courses she'd enrolled in to keep her medical dreams alive somehow. We avoided discussing the investigation, or Izzy. The weight of unspoken fears hung between us. 2 weeks into the new apartment, I discovered Izzy had escalated her tactics. My new employer received anonymous complaints about hiring someone under federal investigation. The manager pulled me aside, explaining they couldn't risk the liability. Another job lost before I'd even received my first paycheck. The storage unit sent an overdue notice. I had 72 hours before they auctioned our belongings. I spent a sleepless night sorting through what remained, keeping only absolute essentials, photo albums, important documents, a few sentimental items. Everything else had to go. I sold furniture on online marketplaces for whatever cash I could get. Buyers haggled over already low prices, sensing desperation. The couch where Ginnery and I had shared so many moments went to a college student for $50. Our dining table brought 30. Each sale felt like losing another piece of our life together. Ginnery wired me money from her meager savings when she found out. I tried refusing, but she insisted, reminding me how I'd sold everything for her treatment years ago. The role reversal stung. Parents were supposed to provide for their children, not the other way around. The federal investigator called with more questions. They'd discovered discrepancies in Izzy's medical records from 18 years ago. The cancer diagnosis might have been fabricated too. They needed me to provide any documents from that time. I searched through the few boxes I'd kept, finding old receipts and adoption papers. My lawyer advised cooperating fully. He explained that proving I was another victim, not a co-conspirator, required complete transparency. Every document, every memory, every detail had to be shared. The process felt like being stripped bare, my life dissected by strangers. A neighbor in the new building recognized me from news coverage of the insurance fraud case. Word spread quickly. Other tenants avoided eye contact in the hallway. Someone slipped a note under my door suggesting I move elsewhere. The isolation felt suffocating. I found work at a 24-hour diner, taking overnight shifts that others avoided. The pay was minimum wage plus tips, barely covering rent. I served coffee to insomniacs and early morning workers, grateful for the anonymity darkness provided. Nobody asked questions at 3 in the morning. Ginnery's health improved with distance from the chaos. She sent photos of herself hiking, color returning to her cheeks. She'd made friends at the clinic, started dating someone who knew nothing about our situation. Part of me felt relieved she was building a life separate from the wreckage. Then Izzy surfaced again, this time in Texas. The investigator called to inform me she'd been arrested trying to open bank accounts under her new identity. The elaborate Venezuelan widow story had unraveled when authorities connected her fingerprints to the Maria Gonzalez identity. The arrest triggered a cascade of legal developments. Izzy faced federal charges for insurance fraud, identity theft, and falsifying government documents. My lawyer explained this was good news for us. Her arrest shifted the investigation's focus. We were clearly victims now, not accomplices. But vindication came with complications. Prosecutors wanted me to testify about the adoption, Izzy's supposed death, the years of raising Ginnery. They needed to establish the pattern of deception. Reliving those memories in a courtroom felt like another violation. Ginnery flew back for the trial preparation. We met at the prosecutor's office, seeing each other for the first time in months. She looked healthier but older, the ordeal having aged us both prematurely. We held each other in the sterile conference room, no words adequate for what we'd endured. The prosecutor walked us through what to expect. Izzy's defense would likely attack our credibility, paint us as willing participants who turned on her when convenient. We'd need to remain calm, stick to facts, avoid emotional outbursts. The truth would speak for itself, she assured us. Izzy's lawyer contacted me directly, despite the restraining order. He offered a deal. If I refused to testify, Izzy would drop all claims to the insurance money. The temptation lasted exactly 3 seconds. I reported the contact to prosecutors immediately. Some prices were too high, even for financial relief. The trial date approached with mounting anxiety. I worked double shifts at the diner, saving for a suit appropriate for court. Ginnery stayed with her cousin, unable to afford a hotel. We prepared our testimony separately, prosecutors warning us against coordinating stories. Local media picked up the story as the trial began. I avoided reporters by using the courthouse's back entrance. Inside, seeing Izzy in an orange jumpsuit felt surreal. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced by standard issue. She stared at me with hollow eyes, no trace of the college friend I'd once known. My testimony lasted 2 days. The prosecutor guided me through 18 years of sacrifice, establishing the emotional and financial toll of Izzy's deception. The defense attorney challenged every detail, suggesting I'd known about the fraud, that I'd benefited from having a daughter. I kept my responses factual, fighting the urge to defend my love for Ginnery. Ginnery's testimony proved more powerful. She described the sewer slide attempt, the identity crisis, the years of therapy. She explained how discovering her mother's betrayal had shattered her trust in everything. The courtroom fell silent as she detailed the cost of Izzy's choices. Izzy took the stand in her own defense. She painted herself as a desperate mother who'd made mistakes but never stopped loving her daughter. She claimed the insurance money was always meant for Ginnery, that she'd planned to return it eventually. The lies flowed smoothly, practiced and polished. Under cross-examination, her story crumbled. Prosecutors presented evidence of her lavish lifestyle in Costa Rica, the other schemes she'd run, the calculated nature of her fraud. Bank records showed she'd spent hundreds of thousands while we struggled. The jury saw through her performance. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Izzy faced up to 20 years in federal prison. As guards led her away, she looked back once. No apology, no acknowledgement of harm caused, just empty eyes and the ghost of her old dramatic lair. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. Ginnery and I pushed through without comment. We had no interest in becoming part of the media narrative. This wasn't entertainment. It was our life, broken and slowly mending. The insurance company unfroze the policy after the conviction. Legal complications meant the money would be tied up for months more, but eventually Ginnery would receive something. Not the full amount, but enough to restart her education. She talked about returning to pre-med, her dreams deferred but not destroyed. I kept working at the diner while waiting for the federal investigation to officially close. Background checks would show the case for years, making better employment difficult, but I'd survived worse. We both had. Ginnery returned to Oregon after the trial. We talked more frequently now, the shared ordeal having shifted our relationship again. Not just mother and daughter anymore, but survivors of the same storm. She sent applications to medical schools, determined to reclaim her future. 6 months after the verdict, I finally received a letter clearing me of any wrongdoing in the federal investigation. The relief felt hollow. Being officially innocent didn't restore the job I'd lost, the savings depleted, the stability destroyed, but it was a start. I moved to a better apartment, still modest, but in a safer neighborhood. Slowly, I rebuilt basic stability. The overnight shifts became evening ones. Tips improved. I started saving again. Small amounts, but consistent. The storage unit with our remaining belongings could finally be reclaimed. Ginnery got accepted to a medical school in California. Not Columbia, but a good program that offered financial aid. She called crying with joy. I cried too, remembering the broken 15-year-old who'd wanted to die. She'd fought back from that darkness to reclaim her dreams. The day she started classes, she sent me a photo in her white coat. The caption read simply, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." I kept that photo by my bed, proof that love could survive even the worst betrayals. We saw each other when possible, meeting halfway between between Oregon and California. The easy rapport we'd once shared was scarred, but not severed. We built new traditions, careful to avoid triggering old traumas. Neither of us mentioned Izzy unless necessary. The insurance settlement finally came through, reduced by legal fees, but still substantial. Ginnery insisted on sharing it, paying off my remaining debts and setting up an emergency fund. I accepted reluctantly, understanding she needed to give back as much as I'd once needed to provide. Life settled into a new rhythm, not the life we'd planned, but survivable. I found better work eventually, using skills that had atrophied but not disappeared. Ginnery excelled in medical school, channeling her trauma into compassion for patients. We healed in parallel, connected despite the distance. Sometimes I thought about the moment Izzy appeared at my door with 3-year-old Ginnery, how different things might have been if I'd said no. But watching my daughter save lives, seeing her strength and compassion, I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Izzy had given birth to Ginnery, but we had given each other life. The scars remained. Trust came harder now. Sleep sometimes brought nightmares of legal documents and eviction notices, but we'd survived what should have destroyed us. That victory, quiet and personal, mattered more than any courtroom verdict. Ginnery graduated medical school with honors. I sat in the audience, graying now and worn from the journey, but proud beyond words. She'd dedicated her thesis to children who'd lost parents, finding meaning in her own loss. As she walked across that stage, I saw not just my daughter, but proof that love could outlast even the cruelest betrayals. We embraced after the ceremony, both of us crying. Around us, other families celebrated their own victories. Nobody knew our story, the price we'd paid to reach this moment. That was okay. Some triumphs were too personal for public display. That evening, we had dinner at a small restaurant near campus. We talked about her residency plans, my new job, normal things that once seemed impossible. The investigation was closed. Izzy was serving her sentence. The insurance money had funded a new beginning. We'd found our way back to stability, scarred but whole. As we parted that night, Ginnery hugged me tight. She whispered thank you, the same words she'd said so many times over the years. I whispered them back. We'd saved each other, mother and daughter by choice rather than chance. That bond, tested by betrayal and strengthened by survival, would endure whatever came next. Thanks for reading this story with me. It definitely kept me wondering about all the little details. I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next one.